Hey everybody, so today I'm walking into the studio and I have a tutorial in mind which I think will be a good one, answering a question that somebody asked on the video that I recorded recently about expanding kind of the coverage. And strangely, this one actually goes back to being more of a kind of a straight Cinema 4D tutorial. So I'm going to get to the studio in a minute and I'll get set up, have a little think about how I'm going to actually record this for you, and I'm going to teach you how to real kind of nail your animations, and rather than just using kind of like dynamics and physics and things, I'm going to show you how to actually take charge and kind of control your animations yourself, giving everything the movement and timing that you want, working on anticipation, that kind of thing. And I'm going to share with you my favourite resource as well, which will do nothing but help your animations. So just going to kind of unlock the gates and get in and get sorted, and let's jump straight in. Okay, so here we are in Cinema 4D, and I've set up just a little head model with a basic mouth. You can see there's a cavity there, and if I zoom in so you can just see the geometry there, and just got some simple lighting. It's just a couple of directional lights just so you can kind of get an idea of the form a little bit more easily. And what we're going to do is we're going to set up a load of poses for this. In fact, I say a load, I'll probably just do a few, just to kind of demo what I'm talking about. And rather than having a load of bones inside the lips and the jaw and all that kind of stuff, we're actually going to have a set of sliders that we can then animate. So let's come to our face object here. Let's just drop this selection, and I will turn off soft selection so we're just getting a better idea what's going on. In fact, let's undo that subdivision surface. In fact, we'll kill it off altogether. We can add it back later if we want to. So you can see there are kind of no funky overlapping polygons. There's a little bit of tearing of a shadow there, but that's nothing to do with the geometry, so ignore that. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on the face, right click, and come down to character tags, and we're going to add a pose morph. In the pose morph here, we're going to choose what we want to actually pose. And I think for this, the thing to do here would be points. So we have a base pose, which is what you're looking at here. Let's double click on this second pose, and we will just say, let's call this sneer. So our sneer pose, when it's yellow, that means it's selected and we are working on it. So I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to go into point mode, going to get my direct select tool, and I'm going to grab a few points like so. Now it doesn't matter, you can use soft selections if you want to. You can use whatever tools you would normally use. Now I'm going to raise up that one side of the lip there. And let's just grab a few of those central points as well and lift them up too, just to kind of balance that out a little bit. And I'm going to move them over to the right like that. In fact, I'm going to take these points and just knock them to the right a bit as well. I'm also going to take this bottom lip and just take those points there and raise them up and to the right, just to kind of compress this a bit. And I'm going to take the points around this section here and do the same, just so that you kind of get that closure there. Now you could have a different pose for the right hand side and another pose for the left hand side, so you could have two different sneer poses. For this one, I'm actually just going to take that polygon there. I'm just going to press UY just to increase that selection one more time, and just control click and get rid of any you don't want to be part of that selection. So probably that one. And I'm going to hit the T key, and I'm going to shrink these on the Y axis and drop them down a bit on the Y axis, just to kind of close off that section of mouth. Now I did it with polygons. It doesn't matter if you're using edges, polygons, points. So now we have a little bit of a sneer. I think one more thing we need to do is just take this central section of that lip and just lift that up, because I think it looks just a bit too smiley. Let's go for that kind of slightly Judge Dreddy raised middle of the lip, and that's probably getting there. I think I might just come in and grab a few of these extra lines here and just adapt them for this sneer pose. Now, this is not a destructive thing that I'm doing here, so you can come in and you can play with this as much as you want. You can refine it all you like. No issues there. Now, if I just click on that pose back up there, back on the morph, you can see our sneer is active. We've got a tick there, and you can see that it's a target, whereas this is the base. So this is all good. Now we can click on the base pose to go back to that, and you can see here this is looking good. That's back to our base. Now what could I do? Let's say we could have another pose which we're going to call ooh is always a good one. So for this, I'm going to, let's see what's a good way of doing this. Let's just grab a loop around the mouth like so, increase that selection like that, and let's just scale that up in the Y and in on the X, and then I'll refine it just by coming into let's do this in point mode. I'm going to come in and grab some points like this. I grab that one as well, lift that up. Now this is not maybe the most accurate when it comes to an actual model, but hopefully you're getting the idea of what I'm doing here. So I'm going to grab a couple more points, just lower them down a little bit. I think actually I'm going to take these polygons here and lift them up just to help. And at this point I would say taking a load of video reference just as you kind of go about your day is always worthwhile. I often record my thoughts like you saw at the beginning of this tutorial, blog, vlog, whatever you want to call it, and I'll often look at those just as reference to how I talk. I realise I move my mouth in a particular way and you'll use yours in a very different way, although of course there'll be some similarities because sound works in certain ways. We all have our own little idiosyncrasies in how we move, and having a video reference is always a good idea for making sure you're getting the personality you want. Another way is just looking at films, so looking at an actor whose voice you like, or who emotes in a certain way physically, as well as the kind of the sound of their voice and the tones and everything. So now we have a base pose. We have to back out so we can see this. A base pose, we have a sneer, we have an ooh. You could do anything you wanted. We could have let's do a kind of a, what should we call this, just closed, I suppose. We could have a closed pose, so we could come in and let's go into polygon mode. We'll take these down. We'll probably want to grab those ones in there, just bring them forward. Let's just hit UY to select that whole area, shuffle it forward a little bit, and then just compress it up like so. I'm actually going to go just a little bit further than you might think, because by the time I smooth these with a hyperNURBS, we'll probably find that it won't be quite as overlapping as we thought. So shift click to select that one. Obviously you could do this with symmetry, would work fine. Just close these and bring them in on the X. Just a note on using these things. I always like to work on a base mesh, like a low res mesh like this, and try and make my mesh look reasonably good without any kind of odd crossovers and intersections. If you do that, if you work with your sub Ds turned on, then sometimes you'll turn it off and you'll go, oh, hang on, what a mess. That mesh does not look good at all. And it just makes it easier to kind of navigate your scene and everything like this. Anyway, I digress. So let's add this back into a hyperNURBS so we can actually see the end result. So this is our closed mouth, which actually looks pretty good. It's it's not going to win any beauty contests, but it works. Let's look at our ooh. Again, looks pretty good. Our sneer could probably do it a bit of work. I think maybe bring that in. This kind of raised section might bring that in a little bit. It's looking a little bit like a turtle, I reckon. Okay, so let's go back to our sneer. Let's turn off our sub Ds and we'll grab some points, make sure our face is active. Let's grab these points here, bring them over, turn our sub-Ds back on, and let's just refine this a little bit. I think maybe we'll take these points in here, and let's just make sure we're grabbing the ones inside the mouth, and I think bring them in and up a bit as well, like so. Let's have a look. Yeah, that's better. Okay, so this is looking much more like it. This is kind of what I had in my head. So this is a way of setting up different poses, but how do you actually then use these to animate your scene? Well, really easy. So at the moment you can see I'm in the mode which is edit. If I swap over to the animate mode, you'll see that each of these poses, other than the base, which is fine, has a slider next to it. So we can turn all these off, and then we can have our full pose, no pose at all, or anything in between, which is particularly helpful. So you can go ooh, or you can go I'm going to close. You could have a closed one with a little bit of a sneer. And this makes it really easy to just animate to a conversation or to an emotion or just to a reaction to anything else in the scene. You can go, or you can go, or you can go, or you could go, or anything. Anyway, so this is particularly powerful. Now, when you want to start animating this, let's just do that here. I'll give myself just a few more frames to play with. Just so I can demonstrate what I'm talking about. So let's start and just do a very quick animation. I'm not going to do this to a conversation. I'm not going to animate to an audio track. I'm just going to show you how it works. So I'm going to start with, let's start with a closed mouth. And I'm going to just, rather than clicking here, I'm just going to say record sliders. And this will record all three. You can just click on the dots to do the ones you want. But for this particular method of working, I like to use closed. So I'm going to come forward a second, and after a second I want him to have been shocked by something, so he's just going to go oh! And I will come in and record those sliders, and then probably a little after that he's going to be less shocked, but he might be a little bit perturbed by what was going on, so he might just start sneering at whatever it is he's seeing. So I'm just going to record those sliders again. I'm going to move forward a bit more, and he's going to have a full-on sneer. Let's record the sliders, and we'll go back to, that's probably a bit too far. Let's go back to our mostly closed position, but I think with just a bit of extra detail in here. Okay, record those sliders. So if we go back to frame 0, press play, you can see the timing's all off. He should have that that shocked expression should happen much earlier. Now, of course, you can come in, you could grab this keyframe here, and you could bring that right back. In fact, where I added a load of keyframes, I probably didn't need to. So let's go back to, say, 80 frames, just so we can see what we've got going on a little bit clearly. Let's press play. That could probably do with being even quicker. I reckon about 10 frames to get to that initial pose. And you can see here it's all a bit too compressed, so I'm going to bring that end pose back to frame 80, and I'm going to knock that one forward there, which is the kind of closing with the little bit of a snarl. So that snarl, I think the snarl might be too extreme, so let's go back to our pose on that particular keyframe there, and I'm going to reduce the sneer. So I'm going to reduce that sneer down to about there, record the sliders. That's replacing, see what I've done there, I was in the wrong frame. I want to be on frame 58 where that keyframe already is, and reduce the sneer like so. Record the sliders, that overwrites the keyframes. Now we go okay, so that's a quick look. If you want to gain more control over this, rather than doing the kind of ease in, ease out thing, what you can do is right click on one of these keys, doesn't matter which one, and go to animation and show F track. Here you go. So here we have the curve for our sneer strength, our ooh strength, and our closed strength. And this means that you can come in and you can adjust these as you see fit. Obviously that they were all selected there, but if I want to just change the way this one works, if I just zoom in so you can see it a bit more clearly, if I want to change the kind of the animation between these 2 points, I can come in, I can change that, or I could hold shift and just do one side. I could have a bit more bounce over between those, and then I can come in and I can just kind of check those out as I go. Okay, so you can see that's a nice slow transition there, works quite nicely. And this is all great. So this means you don't have to worry about easy eases and any of those things. If you do want to retime a whole move or even a couple of points, you can come into Keyframe Mode and you could say my snare strength, the last change, I want to just make a quick change. So you could either take one keyframe and you can slide it around, that's fine, or you could go, you know what, this whole section of animation I want to change, so I'm just going to highlight these 3 keys and then change, and it proportionally slides those keyframes around, and you can do it both ways, of course. You can cut and paste these, just Control C, Control V, just to do that move again if you so needed to. And that is how you take control of your animation. So although I haven't gone into a lot of detail with this, I'm hoping what I've done is just show you just the very basics that would let you then play, and obviously you can stack loads of these poses. So I mentioned before you could have a snare right, you could have a snare left, you could have a pucker, you could have all the phonemes, so you could have your O, E, I, O, U and all those kind of things. You could have lush shapes, and if you had teeth here you could have a tongue that would then fill out those things. You could have eyebrow arches, you could have nose wrinkles, anything like this. Another one might be a good one to do. Let's just add another just for the sake of it, so you can see that you can add more poses even though you've got animation. So I'm going to add a pose and we'll call this one chin side to side. So let's take a load of point, in fact let's just go to the face, make sure you get your base mesh. I'm going to take this edge here and I am going to go into soft selection here, and I'm going to increase my radius just to about there, and we'll have our side to side. So actually I should have called this side to side right and then side to side left or something. So I'm going to bring that across. Actually not sure I like that. Let's increase the radius some more and shift the whole thing across like so, and let's go back to our pose and we'll have add a pose, chin side to side, and we'll call this one left. So the one we just did was right, so we'll just rename that and have right. Right from the character's point of view, obviously not from mine. Let's go to left, bring that over here. Okay, all good. So now we can go back to Animate and we can drop that selection. We can look at our poses and we can start having a bit of this. So as he sneers, we might think, oh, you know what? Let's just have him move his jaw over to his left a little bit, like so. And we can actually, let's do that with that keyframe, just to make it a bit neater. And record those sliders. And we probably need to have a transition for those as well. Let's go there and then other side, bring that back. Record the sliders. Okay, back to the start, just play through. You can see, so this would be a really good way of doing like a chewing motion. So if the character was eating a meal, you could have him just kind of properly masticating. What a great word. And anyway, so this is one way of using this setup. And let's just look at another example. So I talked earlier about having a bouncing ball. Well, let's just take a sphere, just a simple sphere. I'm just going to go display lines so you can see the lines, and I'm going to make this editable. And let's come in and go sphere and go back to character tags, pose morph, and let's have points. So we'll have a squash, and let's edit this squash shape. Okay, so we'll go into point mode, and let's take that point on the top, again into soft selection, increase this drop off here, the radius of the kind of the brush here, and I'm going to go squash. Now you can do this in many different ways, and you could squash from the top or from the bottom, either works. I'm going to do both because I think that works quite nicely. And go back to my pose, I'm going to add another, and I will call this one stretch, like so. And if I go back to my top, I'm going to raise this one right up. I'm going to just decrease my radius and bring that so it's not pointy, but just looks like this. So this is kind of egg shape. And now what we have is a ball which has these poses. So if I go to animate, I can take this right back to a ball, and I'm going to keyframe this ball just bouncing a couple of times. So first of all, let's just raise it up, I think 50, so it would sit on the floor. Let's just add a floor, and obviously it wasn't enough. I think it must be 100 then. Okay, so the standard default ball is 100. So we have this here, and we can animate this. So let's have it just dropping from here. Now this is going to be rough and ready, but I just want to show you how this same process can work for other things. So I'm going to just turn off keyframing for everything other than parameters and the translation. Okay, so add a keyframe. I'm going to move forward about half a second, thereabouts, and drop that down to, well, we know that was 100, so let's drop that to 100. And I'm using, for bouncing balls, I'm just using some reference, which I'll talk about at the end, but you can do whatever you want. You could film yourself dropping a different kind of ball. It could be a tennis ball, a football, it could be a squash ball. Any different materials are going to work in different ways, but let's raise this back up. Keyframe. I think I might have missed a keyframe here. Let's just make sure. Yep. So at that frame, I wanted to be on the floor, didn't I? So back to 100. Make sure I keyframe that. Then move forward less time because it's going to bounce up less and in less time. And then come forward again to, say, frame 24. Put this back to 100. Keyframe that. And then we could keep going smaller and smaller bounces and smaller amounts of time. Like so. Let's go forward just another couple of frames, maybe 3 frames actually. And go back to 100, keyframe that, and let's have a look. So that first bit doesn't look quite right, but the second bit with the smaller bounces looks pretty good. So how do we look at this? Let's go to our timeline. So what we're going to do is we're going to fix the movement first, and then we'll come in and add a little bit of squash and stretch. So if we come to window and go down to timeline, F curve, let's just increase the size of this so you can see it a bit better. And this is our Y position keyframe. And you can see that this works quite well, but this here is not quite right. So what we can do is we could come in and just grab those keyframes, drag them to the side, or we can go into keyframe mode here, just move them across, which might be a good way of doing it. In fact, let's grab all of our keyframes and shrink. Actually, let's not have those ones. Just bring them back like so. Back to the beginning, drop. So that first bounce, I think, is what is not right. I think the first bounce, I think this section needs to be quicker. Okay, so to fix that, we can come in and grab these keyframes and just move them back. So we're not changing the proportionality of them, we're just moving them backwards in time to speed up that animation. And that looks way better. It's not perfect, and there should probably be another little bounce at the end, but we're not too worried about that at the moment. So let's come in, we'll go to a side view, go back to the start of our animation and look at our poses. So here, this is kind of our rest position. We want to record our sliders. So the rest position is kind of the natural state of whatever it is. And don't forget, certain things aren't going to squash or stretch, but it can help give some anticipation to a move, and it can help it to look like it's got a bit more personality. Now, this isn't going to work for things that you want to be physically accurate, although the control is just as good. So let's move forward and we'll do our keyframes first. So at this point, we want to have a bit of a bit of squash. So we'll come in and we'll squash that ball. We'll record our sliders. And we'll also, because we're on the keyframe that we're resting on the floor, we're going to bring that down just to counter things a little bit. And we'll re-keyframe the Y move. We'll go back to here. And that's going to be our rest. So we'll record sliders with 0 squash. And we'll come forward to the floor. We'll have a load of squash. And we'll record that and bring it down onto the floor again. And we'll just repeat this process a couple more times, just to the top. No squash, record sliders. And then go to the last frame of the bounce, where we will have a little less squash. Record the sliders. Now I'm having less squash each time I'm doing this because the force on the ball will be less and less as the bounces are smaller. So we'll just keyframe that position again, and I probably could do a cranking up that squash, and let's just record that. Bring it down and keyframe over the top of that again. So now we have a ball that squashes, and it's subtle, but it really does help. And let's just look in a main view here. Let's look in a perspective view. Let's drop my selection and look at the ball. So here we go. And that squashing I really think helps. Okay, so this is a quick move, but it really does help. Let's go back to here, and let's go back to front view. Let's go back to our sphere, and we'll just add in our in-betweens. So halfway thereabouts, or maybe slightly sooner than halfway. So we're looking at kind of frame 0 to frame 8. So on frame 3, I'm going to add just a little bit of stretch. So I'm going to have this here. I'm going to record the sliders, and then from here we're looking at frame 8 to frame 13. So at frame 10, she's just under halfway. I'm going to have just a little bit of stretch, and you'll see that this is kind of between the two previous keyframes, so that we know that there's some squash there as well. So I'm going to record those sliders, and then I'll do the same here, maybe frame 14, bit of stretch, record the sliders, and I'm not going to worry too much about any stretch between, maybe just a touch. And then on frame 21, just a last little bit. And now we should go back to here, and we should see. So I'm going to have to do this slowly so you can actually see it. So here's our rest frame, which is our natural shape of the sphere. Slight stretch as it starts to move down, and then it squishes, stretches up, and we have what looks like pretty nice animation. Now we can go back here. We could open up our squash actually. Let's go to Animate and show F curve. Oh, my window's open down here. And here we have the squash strength and the stretch. Now you can see that this is looking kind of sawtoothy, which is the result I wanted. But you can also see that there's a bit more squash, a bit more stretch right at the end, which is not what we want. So let's bring that down and keep our pattern reducing. So this is a good place to just look at how you work with your intersections between kind of your in and out points. Now I think this would work better if it was a harder ramp up to that keyframe with a bit of a gentle out. So more of an ease out. So if you hold down Shift as you grab these handles, you can affect just one side of it. So I'm just going to sharpen that up. I'll come over here, sharpen this side up. It's just a subtle move. It's a subtle difference, but it can really help. Like that. And we'll do one more. Okay. So that's all going to be pretty good. Let's have a final look in our perspective view. Press play. There we go. And that's exactly what I wanted to do. And you can see that having that kind of sharper in and an ease out, even though this is a quick, simple animation, you can see it works really, really well. Okay, so down, squash, stretch up, and that looks great. And I think this has more personality and interest than if you were doing a dynamic simulation yourself. So the physics are really good. Bullet dynamics are brilliant, and they have a lot of uses. But if you imagine then having a bend deformer, so you could animate this kind of bouncing around a room, you could have the bend. Let's just do that for a second. I'll just put it in place. Let's just come in here, add a bend, make that a child of the sphere, and we'll move it up. Okay, so let's just see how this could work. So you could have a stretch like this, quite a big stretch, which is fine. Let's actually turn it off to start with. So we'll go back to 0, and on frame 0, we'll keyframe our strength, and just by clicking on the keyframer there, and we'll move forward to the frame where it starts to then take off again, which is there, and we'll up that just to about there, keyframe it, and now we have something that bounces down. And you can see that if we then wanted to follow this path along, it could bounce across the room, and you'd have squash as it lands, stretch as it takes off, a nice rest point, and it will bend slightly as it starts to move around the room. And this is what really creates a lovely animation and a lovely motion, and everything that is done, everything that appears on the screen is controlled by you, not by the software kind of guesstimating what you want it to do. So that's been my little introduction into how you can control your animations and just define everything that happens in the scene very quickly and very easily. So there's one more thing to left to do. I'm going to jump back on the camera and just show you something. Okay, so I hope that was of some use. One final thing, like I say, I want to share is a particularly good resource for animators. And I'm just going to flip the camera around. And I'm not sure if I can do that from here, so I will show you like this instead. Let's just grab it. And this, the Animator Survival Kit, is by far the best resource as an animator that you can possibly buy. There are versions on iPad, I think I already mentioned. There are versions on DVD, all sorts of things. Definitely can't speak of it highly enough, so I might be stuttering and not being particularly eloquent, but it's a fantastic resource. Let's just choose a page at random. Okay, so hopefully I'm showing you this. So there's timings, how to do training, what kind of key phrases you've got, all sorts of things. So it starts with a bouncing ball, goes all the way through different kind of expressions, anticipation, and various kinds of motions, and it's, I don't know, let's have a look. It's over 330 pages, so definitely a lot of information in there. Have a look at the iPad version, is really good, and if you're an iOS user, then it's, you know, it's nice to have on a screen where you can just kind of delve in and look wherever you are, because it's a big heavy book. But Richard Williams is a genius. He's a wonderful animator. There's some nice kind of little stories in there, but more the information in there, which is about how to time your animations, is what I'm really kind of trying to sell to you. So obviously I'm not on a commission or anything, and I have reviewed it in magazines, so I'm not paid to say anything nice about it. But if you spend any money on help for your animation at all this year, then get that book. Okay, so I'm off now. I've got some reviews to record, and I'll see you all again soon. But please leave a comment, do like and subscribe. It helps me immensely. It helps me to understand what you like and what I'm actually doing, which is of some use for you. So yeah, do leave a comment if there's something else you want me to clarify, or if there's another topic you'd like me to talk about. I think I might actually start doing like a Q&A video where I answer some of the smaller topics, and answer questions that have cropped up because of the bigger tutorials I've done. So do let me know, and then if you subscribe, hopefully I'll get you an answer as soon as I can. So I'll see you all again in the next video. Thanks very much. Bye bye.